You're listening to the Intentional Parents Podcast, brought to you by Intentional. Intentional is all about spiritual formation in the family. We desire to bring biblical hope and practical help. Enjoy this week's conversation. All right, welcome back to the Intentional Podcast. Today, we're going to respond to some of your questions. We have such a wonderful group of people that are very consistent about sending in questions, email, social media, even the podcast. You'll drop questions, and we just so appreciate you asking questions. And we find that these particular conversations are not only fun, but we get a lot of feedback from you, the listener, that this is helpful. So we're going to continue to do these until they're not helpful, I think is the idea. So Elizabeth and Phil and Diane, we're all here. And thank you everybody again for rating and subscribing. If you haven't had a chance to do that, please do. And we have a growing community on YouTube, so you can watch all these. If you're at home and you like watching podcasts, check us out on YouTube. Also, you can subscribe there and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen, because anytime we release new content, which is not always on the exact same day, sometimes we release multiple things, you get notified that we're actually releasing stuff. So did something fun today. I browsed the questions for 2 seconds, which Elizabeth originally picked out for this episode. And I said, honey, why don't you be the one today to take all those questions and host us through these questions? So I hope you don't fail. You'll do great. So would you mind walking us through the questions today as we jump in?
Okay, you gave me control. So
you can have it. I'm happy to. I would love to just respond. I don't often get to do that. So
just know they're all probably going to be deep.
I didn't pick them.
We'll start with a total softball.
Oh, that means it's not.
Not at all. Okay, marriage question. It says, we vow for better or for worse in sickness and in health. But what about when worse or sickness happens? How can we surrender to that call to care for one another without bitterness?
That's a softball.
I was joking. I was being sarcastic.
Yeah, I was going to say, you cannot be sarcastic. I mean, your mom's better with sarcasm than your dad.
I don't get sarcasm.
No, you get it more than he does, though, half the time. But you're growing. You're getting better.
You are getting better.
I think the family's just rubbing off on you.
No, it's since I moved here. Your kids say I got more funny.
That's true.
Must be all the son of Ben. I don't know.
Yeah. But just lighthearted.
Yeah, I
That's a great
remember maybe a year or two ago thinking about this very thing, of thinking about when you and I, 18 years ago.
That's me. She's speaking of me, her husband.
Yeah. When we said those words, because we did the traditional wedding vows.
Actually, your dad and your brother did our wedding.
Yeah, it's true.
Thank you.
Dad
I
did
got
our
to
vows.
do the vows.
I know.
I remember.
And we said in sickness and in health. And, we had no idea what those words meant.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
There was intention behind those words, but there was no lived experience behind those words. And so they sound really good, right? For richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. They sound great until you live those stages. And I think they really begin to, the meaning begins to broaden quite a bit. And I think that phrase, in sickness and in health, has just resonated with me a lot in our journey of a lot of sickness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's resonated with you. What does that mean?
Meaning I think we have had to live into that part of the commitment we made to each other. Now those words have deep, deep meaning and embodied experiences behind them. Because so much, pretty much our whole marriage, I've been sick. And then going through
only recently you've been more honest with yourself about how sick you
Yeah.
are, which is almost like a new level of sickness.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah. We've had to live in it a lot.
Yeah.
But the question was about bitterness. How do you live in it without potentially
And I think it's
growing
asking
bitter?
of the spouse who's not sick. How do you surrender to the call to care for one another without bitterness?
Well, I was going to say, I think Phil and Diane, you guys, it's different sickness, but you lost your hearing. That's a version of sickness, right?
Yes.
I was
Yes.
And
26.
suffering. Yeah. And so starting from a young age as well.
Yeah.
And I'll just say, the Bible's really clear. You'll love this. Let another man praise you and not your own lips. So I can say some stuff that you can't. But I think you guys do probably even now, you don't even pick up on it, but how much you guys have adapted your life for where you're at.
Yeah.
And basically disability sounds like a strong word, but it's also, I think, the right word, the disability
it's
of not
100%
being
the right
able
word.
to actually hear present. So Phil is constantly, this is one of my favorite things. When you go to speak somewhere, you can only hear out of I always forget, left or right? Left side. So Phil is always like, nope, I got to be on her right. Because, you'll go speak somewhere and they're like, okay, we'll have you here. And he's like, no, I always have to be on her right for hearing. You're always watching out for her.
Yes.
Left.
Mhm.
So on her left. Thank you. Thank you for that correction.
Yeah.
And you're always making sure that she's cared for, and you're not doing it in an embittered way. You're literally like an extension of her, and making sure that where she needs help or can't, fully even be aware of something because she can't hear it, that she's taken care of. And you do this even by being okay with her being unplugged a lot. Like that's not always the best for you, right? You're not like I love quiet.
It's annoying.
Especially if we're in an argument.
And
Yes, for an external processor
That's
to
what I mean.
have a spouse
That's a lot. So I guess
Yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is, my question, I'm acknowledging that, and I have some of my own stuff I'll share, but I just would say, Phil, how does that make you, like, how have you gotten to that place? Some of it's obviously seems like it's just part of the life and habit, but that didn't just happen. That takes time to grow in and live in. So
It has to be intentional.
yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think when you love someone, and something happens to them, you're in it with them.
Mm.
And so I don't think it's because I'm such a great guy. I just think
You are a great guy.
I love her. So
Yeah.
I'm constantly, maybe too much thinking I can tell when she didn't hear something. I'm saying she didn't hear what you said.
Yeah,
Come over here and say that.
Yeah.
I think you just start, just like you guys do with your children. You know when one needs extra care. So,
Yeah.
So this question started with the word vow.
Mm.
And so what is it? We vowed. I want to stop there for a second because in modern day, people forget that their marriage is it's not just a legal document where you decided to get hitched to someone and no, we don't like each other anymore. I'm tired of you, so let's just divorce. That's our culture, including even in churches. People are too quick to give up. And so when I do a wedding, I said this is not. It is people can forget also it is it is a legal contract, legal to be legally married. You have to get a marriage license, but it's not just that. It's both. It's also a covenant before God. So if you're a godly person, then you need to immediately realize, for starters, yes, this is hard, but before God, we are one. And so you can't just say, well, it's hard right now, so I'm going to break it up. So I think how you not get bitter is I think for me, you start with realizing I didn't make just a commitment to her. I made a commitment to her until death do we part, but also before God. And so to not care for your spouse when they're the one that got cancer or they're the one that, is going through something that's destroying my life. And I don't feel like I've had to, I don't think this has been that hard. What Steve Marshman just went through as a friend of ours, was a founding elder at Solid Rock, the church we planted together with you guys and John Mark and Tammy in 2004, just lost his wife to cancer. And for this guy, Steve is one of my heroes, F-16 pilot, then he got his MBA. And for he's a Bible teacher, he was teaching in our House of Learning. He went to seminary. And for the last 7 years, basically all he's done is take care of his wife as she went through multiple cancers. And he just lost her. And he told me, he said, I can't explain it. My love for her grew during these last 7 years. He misses her terribly. And caring for her literally when she couldn't get out of bed towards the end. He had some help. He had his brother would come by and his brother's wife would come by and help. because towards the end it took two people to turn her and stuff, but he talked about how his love deepened for her. So I think that's how to do it and not become bitter. But I also know that it was hard for him. So I know that he had a counselor that he talked to periodically that he could process it with, and others, a group of men, basically they were the godly guys that helped plant the church. They meet together fairly regularly and they pray for each other. And so he had community. So I think, to not get bitter, you need to guard your own heart. Proverbs 4:23, watch over your heart with all diligence, for from it flow the springs of life. You got to watch my heart. If I'm feeling selfish and it's all about me and what you're doing to me, then I'm going to get into a bitter spiral and it'll just get worse and worse and worse. So I guess perspective, like this could be me. And in my case, she, if I go first, she has already told me, I want to care for you on your deathbed. Now, when you're young, you go, yeah, that'll be great someday, 50 years from now. But when you're older, you think nobody wants to be stuck in a senior home where everybody's 90, 80 years old and, all you have to look forward to is lunch with a bunch of old people or whatever. No, she said, I want to take care of you. So when you have that kind of love, then I think you want to care for the person. I don't know. That's kind of a random answer, but.
And honestly, he has done a remarkable job of not only caring for me, just physically being my ears so often, but two other things as well. In the crisis of me dealing with very poorly with the diagnosis that I was going deaf very fast when I was 26, he spiritually stewarded me through what was a really frightening faith crisis for me, where I doubted not the existence of God, but I doubted the goodness of God. And that is so normal with chronic illness of any kind or loss of something. You doubt the goodness of God because it doesn't feel very good. He so beautifully shepherded me through that with such sensitivity that I, jokingly say sometimes, but halfway mean it, that, Phil saved me. And there is that sense of him laying down his life for me in a crisis, terribly scary time, and then continuing to do it faithfully without complaining, without remarking on how hard it is to have a wife who, only can hear a certain amount of hours because I can't wear the cochlear all the time because it exhausts me. No complaining about that. So I jokingly say he saved me, but there's a part of me that's very aware as we get older, the privilege, if I should have the privilege of caring for Phil into old age, it would be payback. It would be very much to me like when your spouse cares for you through something really hard, through the worst of times, whether that's financial or whether it's physical or emotional. How many spouses have gone through periods of deep depression and that affects the entire home? It instills in me, just this deep sense of loyalty of I'd do anything. It's the same with like our fear. That's what the fear of God is, that deep sense of loyalty. He saved us from so much. I will be loyal to him to death. So I think there is something very beautiful about what happens between a couple when one of you suffers and the other suffers because of the suffering of that one. And you stay faithful to each other. You're going to make a ton of mistakes. You apologize when you're not at your best. And then you pick up and go along. I think it can be the kind of love that all of us want, honestly. We think we can only get it if everybody stays great all the time in the marriage.
The other thing I'd say to answer this question, at the end of it was and not become bitter. And so I think obviously the person that's having to do the care, who's fighting bitterness, is realizing I'm weak, I'm getting bitter, and if they're a believer, the Holy Spirit is in them telling them this isn't right. And then there's a scripture in Hebrews: be careful lest a root of bitterness spring up in you,
Yeah.
and by it many be defiled.
Yeah.
So if you let the bitterness take
You
root,
feed it.
it's going to come out of your mouth towards everybody.
Mhm.
Be mad at your kids, mad at this person, because you're actually kind of, poor me, And I think, so to me, that would drive me to the Lord. Like, Lord, I'm seeing my selfishness, my weakness, my inability. And, we keep, Diane is living in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's blessed are those who are in need and know it. So I think you go to God and say, I don't have the strength to, I can't handle this. I'm falling apart.
Yeah.
Help. I think that's a very biblical prayer. Help me, oh God, be
yeah.
my strength, be my shield. And I don't see how anybody could go through something really difficult. And then the Lord, I love in the Old Testament, his arms are called the everlasting arms. I love to quote that verse. Underneath are the everlasting arms. And there's a place where it says God, he goes, I carried you.
Yeah.
So I think there's times when we fall on the Lord, I am incapable of loving in this way. This is just too hard. Now, part of that might be praying and God says, you need help.
Yeah.
You need, when Diane's mom was in the last few weeks of her death, with her money, she had money, hired sweet Simona, Matthew's wife, as a nanny because we needed a break.
Right.
So, I mean, there's other
help.
ways to handle caring for someone, if it's beyond you. But at the same time, I think the Lord can give us strength to do things we don't think we could never do without him.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
That's good.
And perspective is everything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
if our perspective is we have a right to always be in the richer, not poor, and
Oh yeah. Perspective.
then we're sunk from
That's-
the beginning.
That is so true.
And these kind of things also have a way of just kind of maturing that out of us as well.
Oh, totally.
We have a favorite poem by Jane Kenyon, who was like in the 40s.
Wow.
And it's called, poem a famous poet, is most famous for. And it's called It Might Have Been Otherwise. And she walks through getting up one day, realizing from getting up in the morning to eating cereal at breakfast and taking a nap with her spouse in the afternoon. And she talks about two strong legs. I mean, she's saying constantly, it might have been
I have two
strong
otherwise. I
legs.
woke
It
up
might
this
have been
morning,
otherwise.
had a bowl of cereal with
Right.
milk. It might have been otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Could have been a lot worse. Yeah.
Yeah. And I won't read you the whole poem, but if you like
I
poetry,
can't read it
this is one
without
of the
crying.
ones.
Well,
But-
maybe you should read it. It kind of
Yeah.
fits this question.
There you go.
Okay.
I'll cry when
All
I
right.
read it. So.
She lived from 1947 to 1995. She was not a strong follower of Jesus. So just,
That's only
okay.
48.
That's
She
okay.
died at 48 years
Yeah.
old.
of leukemia.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Wow.
Right at the height of her popularity in this whole world of literature. She says, I got out of bed on two strong legs. It might have been otherwise. I ate cereal, sweet milk, ripe, flawless peach. It might have been otherwise. I took the dog uphill to the birchwood. All morning I did the work I love. At noon I lay down with my mate. It might have been otherwise. We ate dinner together at a table with silver candlesticks. It might have been otherwise. I slept in a bed in a room with paintings on the walls and planned another day just like this day. But one day I know it will be otherwise.
Wow. That's beautiful.
So, Phil's
That's beautiful.
has tears
Yeah.
in his eyes, and I'm
Go to YouTube. You can see
Very
those
much
tears in HD
so.
at this point.
That's
Yes.
beautiful.
Yeah.
The thought that comes to mind is, the Bible says that in marriage, two shall become one flesh.
Yeah.
And it's so easy, especially in sickness specifically, to view it as your spouse is sick. And I think there's a beautiful reframing that can happen over time, is that if my spouse is sick, then I am sick.
Yeah.
If my spouse is hurting, then I am hurting. If my spouse needs healing, then we are healing together, and I'm helping be a part of that. I think if that's really true, and the goal and God's heart in marriage of two becoming one, I think there has to be a beautiful reframing of we are sick in a way. You know?
I think you're so right.
But what about you?
It's almost
I
like
think this
the people
is-
who say we're pregnant. I always kind of laugh.
Yeah.
No, you're not. But there is in a sense,
yeah.
yes, you are.
Yes, that we are doing something.
Yeah.
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 What about you, Brooke? I feel like you probably have a lot.
I was just thinking as you were saying, we are sick. That sounds beautifully poetic. And it takes a death for that to happen.
It does.
So
Who volunteers to be sick?
and to be fair, like, how do you do this without bitterness? I think there's that recognition that this is not just like I changed my mind and things are fine. This is a process. So, I mean, just to paint reality over this question is like, I think it takes time. I have not yet arrived. I'm not where Phil's at. I really am not. I feel like I have a long ways to go to fully embody that, to where it's just secondary, because it is really hard, because it's not just death to ideals, it's death to preferences, it's death to desire. So just three things that came to mind when this question came up. How do we do this without bitterness? I don't know if it's possible to fully do it without bitterness, at least in part, or maybe even at the beginning. I think that's the goal. Some people might be able to, but I think it is hard. The three things are: be honest. I think you have to be really honest about the fact that your spouse is sick, about that this is the reality of your life. And it's really easy to reframe that and kind of pretend that that's not fully the case. Lamentations 3:1, I wrote this down the other day. It says, I am a man who has seen affliction. That stuck out to me because I'm often not honest about that. I think I try to just like, it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. I do this mostly subconsciously until I sit down quiet enough, long enough to be like, I've seen affliction, right? So being honest, I think, is one part. I think the other part is acceptance. You have to accept that this is the new reality, that these are the things going on with your life, with your spouse. Dallas Willard, I wrote this down. This is obviously very true to my life currently, so if you didn't know. But this quote, I came across this Willard quote was great. The cross means the acceptance of limitation on desire. The cross means the acceptance of the limitation on desire. I have to accept that there's a certain limitation placed in my life on even the desires I would hope to have and all the things I'd hope to do because of some of this reality. And that might sound negative, and part of it, I think, probably is in one sense, and it's also very helpful in another. And then the last thing is just a wonderful conversation I had the other day with my therapist, and he just made this one line statement, and he said, well, faith isn't a fix-it system. I'm like, what? Say it again. He said, faith is not a fix-it system. No. It's not hey, I have faith, it fixes it, and then we move on. It's an ongoing holding of tension. Healing can happen this side of heaven, but sometimes it doesn't. Healing will happen eventually, but it's not a fix-it system. It's not a quick fix. It's I am with you in it, not I'm going to fix it and then you'll be fine. It's I am with you. So be honest, have acceptance. Remember that faith isn't a fix-it system. I think that's how I'm currently, as of this week, trying to live into the call that God's put on our life.
That's so good.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I think
Thanks.
what you were getting at with your one, that you're in it together, I thought of Romans 12:15, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. So that's that compassion where God is, one of his character qualities is compassion. So if we have the Spirit of God, when we yield to him, that compassion can be real, and we can weep with those who are weeping, because the person that's sick, they're not happy about being sick.
No.
They'd rather get completely healed. I mean, Vicki Marshman wanted to be with her grandchildren for many years, and God took her home young for her age. Really, I mean,
She's a year younger than me, and she just died this summer.
And she's been not well for 7 years. So,
Yeah.
Well, we've made it through one so far.
We've made it through one. Okay. Do you want another
that was
heavy
a
hitter, or do you
softball.
want a
Okay.
softball? What are you guys feeling ready for?
No, you don't.
We don't know
You
what's
get to
coming.
choose.
Just
You
You
choose.
don't need our permission.
Yeah, you just choose.
Okay. Well,
you have control.
out of all the questions I pulled, only one of them could potentially be light. So let's do one more heavy one and then a light one.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. So this is from, I assume, a mom. And she explains that they have a beautiful 5-year-old daughter with severe nonverbal autism and epilepsy, both the result of a rare genetic disability. And then they have 2 neurotypical children who are a 3.5-year-old girl and 18-month-old boy. And then she says this, I just love the way she worded this. I have a question about balancing these 2 sometimes vastly different worlds and experiences. I'm already crying because we're learning this right now. I heard someone put it this way. I often say as a mom, I'm straddling 2 very different worlds, autism and neurotypical, arms outstretched with a foot in each, trying to bridge the gap between the 2. We can't force our neurodiverse kids to enjoy the norms of the world, and we can't make our neurotypical children miss out. My question is, how do you strike the balance in a way that is God-honoring and full of compassion, grace, and truth towards each individual child and their needs? And then I'm going to throw another question that was asked in there because maybe it'll unfold in the conversations. They asked, how do I work through parenting disagreements in discipline with neurodiverse children? It's hard. Yeah.
This is not a mild question.
I said it wasn't. I said I would do the
This is
softball
the
after
heavy
this.
hit. Okay, yeah, that's right. You said, I was like, this is the softball.
If you answer this well and the bell rings, you get an easy question.
You get the easier one.
Okay.
If not, you get a harder one.
First, one of the things I would love to just say is to take away the misconception that you can give all of your kids what they need in each moment.
Yeah.
So maybe just take the burden off of reality that is all yours to do alone. I think only God can fully, through you and through many people, actually, community, family, friends, can give your kids what they need. And you have to, I feel like more and more I'm learning, you have to have faith that God will give your kids what you can't give them. You know, like there's all these things that I can't, because of my own disposition, my own depravity, my own bandwidth. I can't give my kids everything. So maybe just to even take off the pressure that is going to come from you alone, that God has this gracious way of making the math not add up in so many ways. So that'd be my first perspective shaping response to that. I think that's a lot.
That's very insightful, and I'm really glad you said that, because if you think I am solely responsible for each of my kids, if anything isn't perfect in them, it's all on me. Well, first of all, you're trying to do it in your own strength. And second, you're not Jesus.
Yes.
One of the best things you can do is help you represent God to them in the way you love them, but you want to lead them to the one who will love them perfectly, because one day they're going to have to learn that they can't go through life on their own without his help. And then, God brings other people, grandparents, parents, brothers, sisters, somebody else that, influences them and brings something into their life that did a better job teaching them that than you could have. And I'm really glad you said that. And also,
Thank you.
When you're married, you make up for each other's lack as well. So maybe now, Birdie needs you. She's responding to you better than she's responding to Elizabeth. Well, how beautiful that you're together. If you weren't, if you'd chosen to bail out of the marriage, and now she's got to deal with that too. That would be really difficult. So
that's true.
So now you're helping, but there might be another stage where she needs Elizabeth in a different way.
Well, right now, Scarlett needs Elizabeth. Like she is really okay with not having not much to do with me. Like she's at the stage of life where like I'm daddy and she loves me, but she is like, she right now needs mom in a huge way. And Duke needs me right now. He does not want much to do with you.
Nope.
But Scarlett knows you're there. She knows you're there.
Totally.
She doesn't need you, but if you disappeared, she'd be a basket case.
No, that's
I know what you're saying, though. And here she is opening her heart to Elizabeth. What a good mother you are when a 12-year-old who's more like 15 is wanting to talk to you about everything. That's beautiful.
Yes, I totally agree.
But you need help.
You need help.
You need a lot of help. The two of you you'll not survive this without help. And the only way you're going to get help is if you put yourself out there and you say, and nobody can guess. It's not fair for your family or your friends to have to kind of guess what you need. It has to be specific, we need help with this. Are you available to that or are you not available?
Yeah.
And
I think in this case, we just so resonate because our journey is very similar. I think let's just take autism and epilepsy, like anything that is altering or has altered the brain like that. It's a moving target. So what you need in this season with your 2 other kids being young is going to be very different than what you're going to need as your neurotypical kids advance your daughter in emotionally. Like you will need different things and different conversations. And I remember when Birdie was first being diagnosed, and I talked about it before on the podcast and talked about Vicki Hughes, but she wrote me this letter in the hospital, and there was a line in the letter where she said something to the tune of, this story is not just for Birdie, and it is not just for you and Brooke, it's for your other kids too. And that has always stuck with me. I feel like in this season, I'm clinging to that of, can I trust that if I can see how God has already used this for good I'll just take my own life, in my own person and in my own formation. Can I trust that all the areas that I'm fearful right now, that it's going to be used for harm in my other kids, that they're going to have wounding from? Can I trust that God can use that for good? That he can do the impossible, what I could never do, what Brooke and I could never do if we try to do everything right and meet everybody's needs? Can I trust that God is in the needs that aren't being met and that his healing is there, his presence is there, and that there will be, because we live in a fallen world and because these specific dynamics are really hard on a family, I have to surrender to the fact that my other kids are going to carry pain from this. Right. And I can't rescue them from that. Yeah. But God, we did that episode with Sally, and she just kept saying, but God. And I was like clinging to that. But God is so much bigger than, because my natural go-to is just try to be everything for everybody. And I have now all this information of how to do that. And as I'm living it, I can drive myself crazy of like, I can't do all the things that Birdie needs and be present to everybody else and be attuning to their needs. I'm one person. Yeah. And when Brooke's home, we are still heavily outnumbered. So I think it's that, like, you have to constantly keep that at the forefront. And then there's also the very real reality of, this beautiful picture of straddling both worlds. You will always be living in both worlds, kind of creating a new world within your family. And they're not neat and tidy. And your daughter's needs are going to bleed all over everybody else's needs. Yeah. And yet there's somehow beauty that's created in that mess. And it is a mess. It is a mess, for sure.
Yeah. What was the second part of that question? I'm just thinking.
Yeah, it was somebody else's question, but I put it in with it because I think it just fits in the feeling torn and how to work through parenting disagreements in discipline with neurodiverse children.
Oh, I do not want to talk about this. I do not want to talk about this. This is my biggest
We
point
were
of
literally
failure.
just in a joint therapy session talking to our therapist about this. And
so
the thing that's coming to mind.
Let me just open my note.
Yeah.
I'll just read that. That will help you.
But
Keep going.
he, in such a non-shaming way, because we were walking through the, like, when these huge meltdowns happen, we have our own versions of meltdowns and our own, like, things that happen between the two of us. And so we were giving him a real life scenario and asking him to help us
see it
and know what to do. And he just, in a very non-shaming, just very like, well, duh type of way, just said, sounds like you two need to go to coffee and agree on what your plan is.
Yeah.
I'm like, sure, it's that simple, right? Like,
and then he kind of chuckled, he knew,
And it is that simple. And he was absolutely right. But it's easier for me to maybe say a couple things on this in the sense that it'll be easier than for you to say. But I think a point to maybe make is I have not done a good job of being fully aware. I'll say I'm on the same page, and I do think I mean it until these big outbursts happen and I realize, oh, I'm not on the same page. Yeah. Meaning I'll just go into, oh, this is behavioral. I'll basically click back into parenting with all my other kids, which are all the rules apply that we've set up.
Basically, stop it.
Yeah, but all these rules do not apply to this situation.
Right.
So to the person listening who is struggling with being on the same page, you have to get, as Elizabeth said, you have to agree on the terms and you have to commit to it. And I'm saying this as a person who has failed at that, who does not do that well, and is still literally in the middle of trying to figure out in those moments when I'm elevated, dysregulated, how do I actually stay firm to those commitments, to not try to parent in a different way, but to use these foreign tools that someone's given us. That's it's really tricky to just turn off this part of your brain or all your instincts. You basically take your instincts and go, nope, let's just throw those out the door and try a whole new way. And that sounds nice in the sense that it could be helpful, but it's so hard to do.
The moment.
And then it was also acknowledging that my response is, and this might be helpful to the person listening or not, but that for me in those moments, one of the reasons my mind goes like back, and one of the reasons I even become angry in those moments, is because it's me grieving the family that I have. And that sounds, nobody likes to hear that, right? Like, and I don't like how that sounds. I don't like grieving the family I have, but that's part of the truth. The part of the problem that I'm struggling with deeply that comes out in those moments is it's an accepting piece. It's grieving that this is so hard, that it's not simple, that it's not linear, that it does take a lot of effort, that it's not what I had dreamed or hoped for. Now, I wouldn't change it. I don't want the family I have, but I have to be honest that I'm grieving parts of the family that I have. It's highly, highly, highly hard and inconvenient that Elizabeth is sick. Now I have to that's not her fault, but I have to be honest about that and not pretend that I don't grieve that. Yeah. And same with where Bird's at and our other kids' health. And so I think that it's being aware of that stuff and being honest about that stuff. And I'll just say I'm in the middle of it and it's super messy and it's not linear and clear. And it's like an ongoing rotating door for me of some days, some moments, I got 5 moments or 10 moments a day right now to practice. Some of those moments are good. Some of those I don't do well. So it's kind of okay, Dave, well, that was good. Let's try that again. And then you come back around. You're like, oh no, I did not handle that one well. And so
you're grieving what was God never desired to be.
Yeah.
It's the Romans 8 thing. The whole creation groans, longing for its redemption.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's not heaven till heaven. You're longing for when everything's right.
When everything's fine.
Birdie has no results of what, transpired.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a normal thing that you're honest enough to say. And that the fact that when you say grieving the family you have, you're saying you're grieving that everything isn't like it's going to be one day.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that's the fallen world we live in. And as a believer, in Romans 8, it's comparing it to the glory that will be revealed. So we know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And so knowing what's coming helps, but it helps you even have a perspective that the affliction you're going through now is not forever. And
so I would like to just address this woman maybe a little bit more directly, because I know that sometimes the podcasts get passed on to others who maybe need to hear. But the fact that it feels like just the two of you in the midst of raising this 2 neurotypical kids, 1 neurodiverse, and all the angst that comes with that, the trauma that comes with that. A family in as far as God intended it. So not as an ideal, but actually God's intention for the family. The church is supposed to model itself after what God intended the family to be. The minute Birdie got sick, and there's quite a few of us in the family now. There's 19 of us. As soon as Birdie got sick, our family, it became the responsibility of our whole family in a sense. We've lost this idea in America. We don't live close to each other. We don't do life together much, but God's ideal doesn't ever change. Now, I've always wanted all my kids to live right on my street, and nobody's ever agreed to it yet. But that's not what I'm talking about.
You're pretty close.
But we did it like Oswego for
you did right across the street.
You did. You lived on my
Scarlett
street.
and I counted. It was 70 steps from your front door to ours.
That's funny.
So, but the point is, you have a family, and unless your family is pretty dysfunctional, it's a wake-up call to all the rest of us that Birdie's ours. We don't just get to enjoy her when she's cute. Birdie is ours for all the damage maybe that is happening to your neurotypical kids. So, but we need to know what to do because you guys are in the thick of it. You guys are learning everything. And what you guys have done for us is, I have this false ideal sometimes that knowledge is power, that anything hard, if I just know more about it, it's going to be less hard. But you've taken advantage of that and brought me into all the knowledge part of it. So you've allowed me to sit in silently to some of your doctor appointments with neurologists and pediatric neurologists and really educated me on it, which then, of course, I bring it to Phil and I give him, the Cliff Notes version of this is the reality. You guys have really involved us and you've involved the rest of the family. And it shows up so that when you need help, you went through a particularly crisis, your sister Rebecca, and, you guys can disagree with the best of them. Every single Comer can disagree with the best of them.
It's a gift they all have.
But when it came to a crisis, she left her job. She flew herself up. She was there to offer what you couldn't and what even I couldn't.
I was thinking about that actually this morning, that she just so happened to be in the hospital room when Birdie got diagnosed. She was visiting, staying at your guys' house, trying to have a few days for yourself. So she helped a bunch.
She walked into the room when the doctor was giving us the news, like she has infantile spasms.
And it was that's a whole story. It was just what's the doctor called? That's just like the pediatrician on the floor. He was like the hospitalist, right? Is that the right word?
Something. No, it's okay. Let's not get hung up on it.
Anyway,
he
just happened to be, he wasn't the epileptologist or the neurologist because it was on a Sunday, and he awkwardly came in to tell us what she had, but to tell us he knew nothing about it because it was super rare.
And he's kind of like underplaying it.
Yeah.
But sort of like,
and she's standing in the corner on her phone looking up, what is infantile spasms?
And
what
she
is
has
West
a medical
syndrome?
background, so she got a lot of it.
And then what you're talking about is when our son got really sick.
Yeah.
And she flew up several times, was one of the only people that was in the middle of the storm seeing it all.
And others of your siblings have come in financially or, know, as
in
they
huge ways.
can.
No, in every way we've been.
Yeah. And this is from a family that is highly imperfect. I mean, you listen to us on the podcast, tell how we're not the easiest people. We're really intense people.
Help. I mean, I'll never forget, we just done a parenting conference in Central California, and we went up to where we used to vacation when you were little, up in Arnold. Yeah. Because we had a bunch of good memories there. Let's spend a couple days there before we come home. And we checked into this not very nice hotel in Murphy's, and we get this call in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I remember.
Birdie's sick. We need help.
Yeah.
We just packed up, left when it was dark. I remember we were driving towards Sacramento and the sun's coming up.
You guys left in the middle of the night?
What?
Yeah.
You left in the middle of the night?
They couldn't sleep.
Yeah, we caught.
Well, we couldn't go back to sleep. We're in this kind of crummy
we
hotel.
threw everything in the thing and took off. But we weren't driving towards the Sacramento airport thinking, oh man, they just ruined our 2 days alone. We were thinking, we got to get there as fast as we can.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so,
and I think
that's not because we're so great. It's just because the family is this unit.
But there was a little bit of from our perspective, you're in the middle of horror. There's a little bit of a sense of a high in those moments of you know you're needed.
Yeah.
And I can be as irresponsible and selfish as anybody, but it was a sense of high calling. Like our kids need us. We're going to be there.
Yeah.
It's not like an inconvenience. It is what Phil's trying to say. It felt like very much like a privilege. Not because we're unselfish. We can be super selfish.
Yeah.
But because I think it's a God thing. I think His Spirit just puts this urgency on you. But if you shield your family from that, or you don't want the inconvenience of all the advice they might give you, that's bad advice.
And I think, and I want us to we've talked about doing an episode on family in crisis, and I think we should. So I want to pivot just a little bit here because I think there's a difference between the beginning onset of like a significant crisis, a life change.
Yes.
Birdie's was a rapid onset diagnosis followed by a years of unfolding.
Yeah.
And so what you're explaining is everybody rallying in the onset of the crisis.
Yes.
I think with the mom who asked this question, with any form of neurodiversity, there's a switch in care that is needed when it's anything chronic, anything lifelong, anything that's not, you do this treatment and things return back to normal. Yeah. And you've said several times that you have to be told what is helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the journey for us of we have to be able to figure out, because we have loving people who do want to help, we have then the responsibility to ask for help, to tell what would be helpful, to try new things, and it's messy, and it's been such a journey for me because I have a really hard time inconveniencing anybody, and learning to ask for help. And so I think for us, it's been a dance of you reminding me I'm here to help, me being like, oh yeah, I gotta like figure out how they could help, and communicate clearly with you. But I think anybody who's listening, because I know there's more people listening right now who are listening to this and who are like either feeling sad or angry, sad that they don't have what we're talking about in their own family, or angry that they don't have what we're talking about. That is much more normal than is the context of our family. And as much as we would love to say that's what the church is for, the church is a family, there are churches who do that beautifully, and there are churches who don't do that beautifully. There isn't a perfect solution. We could say the most ideal is that you have a community group around you. Well, community group's wonderful, and it's messy and it's flawed. Like there's no perfect solution. But you do have to find a way to not isolate and to be able to keep trying and keep finding people who don't have just the quick answers, who don't have just the niceties to say, but who are willing to like roll their sleeves up and say, continue to ask you, what can I do? Please tell me. I genuinely want to. Yeah. And so I think for the people listening who this isn't their story, keep asking the people that is their story. Keep saying, I really do want to help. Keep trying stuff. Keep inserting yourself.
You don't want to just help in a way that you enjoy helping.
Yes.
And you were very quick to correct my language early on, where I was trying to see the rainbow.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted the bow at the end of the story. And you were very honest and gentle, but it still was a correction of that's not what you needed right now.
Yeah.
What you needed was to sink into the reality of this changes everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really want some resilient people with you, if at all possible, who are not, you're not going to have to handle their emotions too.
Totally. Because
if you are looking into a family, or you have a close friend or family member who is going through something like this, you need to understand that you need to come in actually with the attitude of the Philippians 2 attitude that Jesus had, and that is to just serve the needs. May not be the way you wish you could serve them.
But to serve the need, you need to know the need.
Yeah.
And it's easier with you guys because we live a block away and we work together. So like right now, today, we're talking about how we can help because you're going through a rough path.
I was just going to say, that's part of it.
But with John Mark and Tammy, to stay close, they're 1,000 miles away. So it's going to take more effort on our part to even know.
What the needs are.
Sunday talks to Diane every week now. That's really helpful. We know what's going on in her life. So I think that's on the older generation. It's on us to pursue our kids because you guys are building a life and you're raising children. And so,
but to pursue them as servants,
how can we serve
parents.
you? Not we need more from you. Why don't you come visit us more? You know, how can we come serve you? And the other, you combine two questions. So the more basic one, like, hey, we're not on the same page with discipline. Jim's answer to you was really smart. That guy is really smart. And smart people can say things really simple in little phrase that just, he's done that for us too.
Yeah.
But you need to go have a cup of coffee and get on the same page.
Yeah. Right. And
getting on the same page is a huge thing. Most couples never get there.
Know.
And so when we teach on marriage, one of our 12 things is get on the same page and stay on the same page. Because you can start off on the same page, but then this comes up and you're not on the same page. So that's the work of marriage
Yes.
it takes communication and
Mhm.
love and service. So that's
And I'll
And it
say
takes time.
the context of our conversation, and I feel like this is important as we wrap up this question. He first asked a bunch of questions about what our therapists are saying, therapists for Birdie, what the practitioners are saying, what's happening, what are we doing to try to get more help. He first asked all the clinical type questions. And then he said, well, it sounds like you guys are very much on the path of getting help. You're doing all the right things. So then he said, you guys, so I think that now, and I understand we are speaking from a place of privilege of having been able to find, we've had to work really hard for it, but to find providers that can help, to have insurance that will cover it. Like, I understand we are speaking from a place of privilege with that.
Yeah.
And I think it feels near impossible, and in many ways is near impossible if you can't expect that you and your spouse are going to know how to respond to a sensory meltdown or the anger that can come with a child with ADHD or the challenges of autism. Oh my gosh. Like, that you're just going to know how to handle that and how to parent that child differently. You're going to need a lot of help of people who've been trained to understand, to
But you said something that I actually disagree with. You said we come from a place of privilege. Now, I'll agree. Yes. Do we have jobs? Do we work hard? Do we do all that? Yes. But to push back a little, we have to make ongoing, consistent sacrifices to make that a reality.
Yeah.
And Jim said, even in our session the other day, he was saying one of the hardest things is that all your friends are going to be able to go to Disneyland and you're spending money on medical care.
Yeah.
And that's the truth. And I think to lie about that.
They said you're spending your vacation money on therapy.
Yeah.
I said, yeah.
and truth be told, yesterday there's two different things that we're paying for out of our pocket just to make this reality a little more bearable with therapies and different stuff that it's like insurance won't cover. But we look at it and we go, there's just no way we can't not do that, right? Because it's stuff for her that is essential for now. And so I think it's, I don't even want to make that the point. I just think maybe to paint the picture that there's privilege, but there's also, like, for anybody listening, you're going to have to make the decision, well, what is more important and what is for this season? It doesn't have to be forever, but there's a lot of calculated sacrifices. And I think that was helpful even in the therapy session for us to go, oh, that's exactly what we feel, but we just don't always put it in that framework of like, it's not that, it's this.
Yeah.
And it's going to look like that for a while, I think, if specifically with that particular need. But
Yeah.
we have gone, we made it through two questions, guys. We
But
did
she
a
has
good
to do
job.
the easy one, right?
Well,
Or are we done?
I think it's time to
I
wrap
think
up.
we might
but-
have to save it for next time. I think
We'll just
this
do
might
two
be the
hard
first
ones.
time I picked the questions and maybe the last time you guys
No,
let me.
you-
But that was a good conversation.
But you promised him a softball question.
Yeah, how soft is it?
Is it a one-sentence answer?
Dad's going to have a lot to say about it because it involves children reading their Bible.
Oh, never mind.
It
Yeah.
has some children reading the Bible. No, that's not softball.
that's
a chance for me
All
to
right,
talk
we'll
about
have to save it.
the Word
We'll
of
have to
God.
save
We'll
it.
save
Yes.
that. All right. Thank you for listening today.